Coach MK. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to talk to you guys about a few things. A lot of things, actually. I'm going to try to make this quick. I know it is Super Bowl Sunday. And the last thing you want to do is listen to me talk. But evidently, according to the survey, some of you do want to hear me talk. So I want to start there. So to be clear what I'm talking about, collecting emails in this country is a dicey proposition. And it's not something I've really been in the business of doing. I do have one very small forming mailing list, and it's composed mostly of people that have signed up for the general newsletter, either on www.coachedandloved.com or through the button on the Coach MK Facebook page. So if you signed up on the button in either of those two places, you should have received a survey in the past week asking for your input on what you consume from me now and what you would like to see more of. And I also gave a couple of free form questions about tell me what you want, what you really, really want, and we'll see what we can do. And I wanted to address that first. For those of you, that went to 600 people, and I've already got 200 responses, which is kind of mind-boggling for a survey. That's a really, really high rate. So first of all, thank you for taking the time. I totally appreciate it. If you haven't done it yet, there's still time. I'm not going to be closing this for a while. But the reason I'm doing it to answer a couple of the comments, I just wanted to respond first to a couple of the comments that I saw in the preliminary survey results. So what's going on right now? I think I've been pretty clear about why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I stepped away from some of my bigger commitments. Going too much deeper into that story is going to be crossing a line, because that story isn't just my story, it's my kid's story. That's happening against a very dramatic backdrop in Denver right now with a teacher strike that's supposed to start on Monday, that I fully support, by the way. Our district has managed this horribly. At the backdrop of a superintendent that, an interim superintendent that could not possibly want this position. A retiring principal, and a whole bunch of teachers, all of which really do care a whole lot about my kid, but have bigger things going on right now that could cause us to have answers and resolution in not the timeliest of fashions. So while I'm figuring out, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to make you guys a whole lot of promises and then not keep them. The worst thing in the world would have been to stay in my previous position and be like, hey guys, remember that maternity leave I took? I got to take that again. No one wants that. So until my life is a little bit calmer, this is what I'm doing. I'm focusing on my family primarily. I've retained a very small handful of one-on-one. Hi, thank you so much. I've only retained a very small handful of one-on-one clients. Literally a handful, and I still have my local runners that I adore, but and two small semi-private. Basically, all the local runners are the other semi-private client group. But I digress. I've kept a toe in this because I never intended to retire. It was always, I'm stepping back, and I've been consistent and clear. I am stepping back until I know what I can and cannot promise. The worst case in the world is I start selling coaching and then find out that we can't get any of the things that my son needs, and the only solution is for me to personally volunteer in the classroom 6 hours a day. I don't want that. That's totally a possibility, and with all this up in the air. So I don't really want to go too much more into it, but if that answer isn't enough, I got nothing, because that's literally what's happening right now. And I don't like uncertainty any more than anyone else does, but this is my life, and I'm adulting the best I can through it. So what am I doing right now? I got that question a lot in the survey. So that's a really good question. It's the problem of work. I had to take a course in grad school that we called Problem of Work, and it was for entrepreneurs, and I really, 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 really liked it. Where you define what is it that you really want to do, what is it you want to charge money for. They might not be the same thing, or that thing that you really want to do, no one wants to pay you for you to do it. So what I'm doing right now is following that same framework and saying, what do I want to do? I want to coach. I want to do this. I want to answer questions. I want to be present, and I have a few tools to do that with, because there's no one tool that rules them all, but I'll get to that in a minute. So right now, I'm kind of doing what I want to do. Without making promises that I'm not sure I can keep. So that's why I'm only on here infrequently. I'm not foam rolling every night anymore, because January was a really, 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 really hectic month in this house, and 7 p.m. wasn't working out as well as it had in November and December. We also had some sitter transitions, and that we're looking for someone new in the evening. So once that's resolved, maybe things will smooth out a little bit, maybe not, we'll see. So these are all the things that change is not easy for special needs kids, and it's doubly hard on special needs moms. So if you're a special needs mom, I know you feel me on this. Everybody else, be very, very lucky that you don't have to understand where I'm coming from, because it's tough. Okay, so the next question, and this is why I sent the survey, is like, well, what do you want? That Tsudoku book club night was really fun for me. I enjoyed it, but I also get as something to consume. It was really long. We rambled a lot because Erica and I are buddies and we talk in multiple different directions, and our brains kept going off on tangents. I get it, but that was fun for me and I enjoyed it. So then the question becomes, did you enjoy it? What part of that did you like? Would you like to see more things like that are, of course, shorter and focused? Is there a direction while I'm figuring out what it is that I want to do and I'm willing to continue to do for free? Is there other stuff you would like? Anytime you said, all of the responses have said coaching, I love that, I appreciate that, I hear you, I want to come back to you, but that is something that's going to have to be in a paid capacity, because that's going to be trading expertise for time, as opposed to I'm just having fun with this. Because don't get me wrong, coaching is fun, but then that gives you a claim on my time, and I can't trade money for claims on my time until I know how much time I have to give, or how much time I have to trade, if that makes sense. So, and all the people that I'm still working with right now, I've been working with quite literally for years, so it's a very well-oiled machine, where we don't have to talk deeply or super frequently or break down, because they know. By this point, we've been working together so long, they can usually guess what I'm going to say before I say it, and we've kind of evolved to a different plane of the coach-client relationship that I never really was able to get to with anyone in my previous role. So there's that. So while I'm trying to reconcile 1 and 2, I appreciate the input, but here's what it comes down to, right? Several of you indicated that you want more written content. Cool. I can start a blog. My website's going to be coming soon. I could start a blog, but are you going to read it? So, and if so, what are you going to read? The problem that I had previously was in a Facebook group where I was writing a lot of stuff all of the time. Every time someone wrote, I would jump. Because if I didn't jump right away, there was a pile-on effect where a thread would go far this way, and I would have to work to drag it back, so it actually was more efficient for me to be in there all the time. Being like, I need to be the one answering all the questions. So since I'm not in a position to do that right now, and I'm nervous to open it up, we also had a whole bunch of people that never used Facebook. Or they would be like, Facebook is intimidating, there's too much going on, I can't go in there because I feel like I'm left behind or I'm missing stuff. Or every time I go on Facebook, Coach MK isn't there. Or, I mean, since there's no way to make everyone happy, and I get that, then, there will never be a way to make everyone happy, then I got to figure out what I like and what I want and what I'm willing to do and what makes the most sense. And so one of the tools that I found for that is this, Twitch. Twitch is fantastic, it's interactive. As you can see, there's a chat. When I have planned in advance and I have no kids around and I'm not distracted, I can watch this chat and we can talk back and forth. And when it works, it's brilliant. And if you haven't been paying attention to other forms of social media, if you haven't watched one of these all the way to the end, then you might not know I have a YouTube channel now too. And every single Twitch I've ever done, as soon as it's done, I go upstairs and I export it into my YouTube account. So if you miss things live, it's not like, wah, wah. What you've missed is the chance to interact with me live. You have not missed the content. I wouldn't do that to people. Because it doesn't make sense. I wouldn't want it done to me. I totally get it. You can't get there. But I promise you this, once we're paying for content, I will have several windows where I'm going to be here and available to interact with. And you guys are going to, and anyone that wants to pay to work with me is going to have to try a little bit to make one of these windows work in one form or another. So, because before it was I had to be jumping everywhere and there was only one of me. So now it makes more sense for me to stay in one place and be come, here are the hours. Office hours are going to be during this period, this period, this period, and this is how they will be. Because also writing answers takes a whole lot of time. I give better answers, more thorough answers, more thoughtful answers when I'm speaking extemporaneously, for example. And I get it, a lot of you want written content, but that takes time, that costs money, and that is really permanent. Really permanent. Meaning, I know y'all pass it around. I know you share it, and that's okay. but now I have to, but this thing that takes time and money and has to look pretty before it leaves my hands, I have to decide how much of that I'm willing to do for free and what's worth sharing and circulating and making permanent in the atmosphere before I start charging for things. Because the last thing I want to do is have a business model that's contingent upon a whole bunch of written content that I know you guys are sharing behind the scenes or splitting the cost of a program. And I know that I'll never be able to totally eradicate that, but I'm hyper aware that it happens. And you know, if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that I enjoy, works for me, and that isn't going to make me bitter about still doing this 3 months from now, if that makes sense. And so that is going to be less back and forth, or more limited back and forth in a question and answer written form on Facebook, and probably less written content. For now, not forever, but just for now. Because again, I know it's easier for you guys to read, but even a transcription, that costs money. I could do it, but it costs money. So the question is every bit of like, what do you want to see as much as it is what do you want to pay for, and what do I want to pay for? Because if I'm not taking in money, I can't be paying for things like fancy transcriptions for items here, which also troubles me, because I know that excludes a lot of my hard of hearing and deaf client base, or people in the, like, not to be ableist, I'm deaf in one ear too, so I'm hyper aware of this. And I've already started paying for transcriptions for my morning mantras, and that's going to be part of the blog on my new website, coachdandloved.com, when it launches. But then I have to be really cognizant of whatever I launch, that it does not exclude people that have the same disability that I do on a bigger level. So there will be more written content. I just don't know what, how much, or when, or how I'm going to deliver it. So we'll get there eventually. These are complicated questions, and I want to be really sensitive and take my time before I start, again, launching into that whole trading time and promises for your money. And then, so that kind of wraps up the survey. You still have plenty of time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check your email, check your spam. If you have signed up for the newsletter at any point, if you're on the nice list, then you would have gotten this letter. There were about 600 of you. If you did not receive it, don't worry. You can still write info@coachdandloved.com and give me any sort of feedback that you want. But the thing that is interesting, like make sure, because this is, again, make sure that what you're saying to me is kind of useful, and not to be like every comment is totally useless, but feedback is only good and useful if it's actionable instead of emotional. If you don't listen to my podcast, that is fine. I get it. Podcasts are not for everyone. I've gone out of my way to make it short and digestible. But y'all know I curse, and I mark everything I do as explicit for that reason. I'm not going to be cursing less. That is part of who I am, and every time I'm not 100% me, the one person will complain about the profanity, and then when I dial it in, 10 people will get mad that next time that it didn't sound authentic, and they didn't trust what I said. So I'd rather curse and keep your trust than really monitor what I say and start to sound like everyone else out there. So there's that. But I get it. If profanity just means that like you absolutely cannot be around me, I accept it, and I'm really sorry. I hope we can find other ways to work together in the future, because a lot of the profanity does not translate into my written work. So there's that. The next thing I want to talk about is Training Peaks. I'm always excited when the things that I put on Facebook and Instagram get traction, but I'm always a little confused as to what's going to get traction and what you guys are going to hear. For example, this year-long, clearly documented story of rehab has now become a story about my abs. And I'm like, it's just a little confusing for me, because it's abs are cold comfort. I really would rather have had that year of my life backing out of bed than to have really awesome abs right now. And I don't know how, yes, I'm fortunate, and I've said this clearly and consistently too. I'm fortunate to have access to such a terrific Pilates studio. I am fortunate to be able to afford it on a monthly basis, and I'm fortunate to be able to work it into my schedule. At the same time, I don't have a lot of good options. The days that I don't do Pilates, I'm in a lot of pain. I need that to keep my spine intact, and I've talked about that straight up too. So some of the responses to that have been rather negative, borderline visceral, and which I get. Like, if you're hurting and you aren't able to get the assistance that you need. I see you and I feel you. You're talking to a girl that grew up without health insurance because my dad had a heart attack when I was really, really little. Another story I don't bang the drum about because my dad is still alive. And I don't want anyone to feel shamed. Things were very different in 1983. But I digress. I get that we're now in a place where a lot of people don't have access to basics or can't leave work for one reason or another. I have checked my privilege every step of the way and acknowledged how fortunate I am. At the same, so beating me over the head with it isn't necessarily productive for anyone. Like, if you're hurting, I see you and I feel you, and I would love to help you. At the same time, abusing me shouldn't be a step towards making you feel better, because I felt like shit for 18 months. I was very open, consistent, and clear about it. Just because I wasn't whining about the work every single day on Strava doesn't mean I loved it. I'm never going to love Pilates any more than I'm going to love mountain climbers or push-ups or any of the other things that I ask you guys to do. But it's not about liking the work, it's about loving running. And I will do whatever I have to do in order to be able to run for a really long time, sleep without pain, snuggle my husband in bed. I couldn't do that because this arm couldn't go forward. My shoulder couldn't go forward like that in any capacity. So I couldn't even sleep on my side for a really long time. So I tell you that to tell you this. Like, there's a lot that I don't talk about because I just kind of, that's the work, that's it, I'm going to do it. It's that farm girl pragmatism that, you know, from Tennessee that I get. And that's pretty much it. It would not have been productive for me or for anyone else, in my opinion, to look back over the past year and say every single time I put Pilates in Strava to be like, didn't love it, got it done. Didn't love it, got it done. Because that's just reinforcing a negative feedback loop. That's not how I think, and it's not how I operate. The work don't need you to like it. It needs to be done. And I'm like, got it done, got it done, got it done. And sometimes nothing to say about when there's nothing to say. It's better than having something bad to say. Like, that run hurt and I couldn't do it. Or that was terrible and I had to stop. So I am so grateful for the mundane. I can't begin to articulate it, and I don't get bored that easily. I just do it and I don't think about whether or not I like it. I've never asked myself, do I enjoy, I don't know, hollow rock hold. Hollow rock hold is a really great move, and if you can do it, you should be doing it. So there's a really great line there's a new book called The Happy Runner. I strongly recommend this book if you haven't read it yet. But there's a line in there that says, the happy runner learns to take joy in the mundane. And I have really internalized that on a new level. Remember in the very, very earliest podcast that I did 2 years ago, I said multiple times, I don't get bored. Boredom's not something I acknowledge. I run in the same place all the time. I have my familiar patterns. This is where I do my tempo runs. This is where I do my speed work. This is where I do my easy effort runs. And or maybe I have 2 or 3 options now for easy effort runs, depending on the run and the duration and the length and whatever. So yeah, I don't get bored easily, in that if you really want to have longevity in the sport, particularly distance running, then we need to find joy in the mundane. And we can talk about ways to do that, but this is sort of what that older generation, what they mean when they look at us and call us, or millennials, really spoiled. Like, you know, you guys want to be happy, what's wrong with you? Some things just have to be done. I don't like paying bills either, but that has to be done. And so there's a whole category of things in my brain that are part of adulting that I just don't ask myself if I enjoy. Does this bring me joy? If it gets me to something that does bring me joy, like keeping this house, then fuck yeah, I'm going to pay that bill. Fuck yeah, I'm going to do the rehab because it keeps me running. Running brings me joy. So it's not every single task can or possibly will bring you joy. But if they're a stepping stone in the path towards something that does, I say don't ask yourself whether or not you like it. That's the luxury that you don't have. You just can't afford to think that way. Just do the work. Just do the work if it lets you do the thing. And thank God I did not give up on Pilates in the last year and a half, because like I said, I'm turning the corner now. I ran 26 miles last week. What the hell? I ran another 2.5 this morning. I ran 7 days in a row. I haven't done that in God knows how long. And that was made possible by a whole bunch of work that I don't love, but did it anyway. So there's that. No offense to Pilates. I mean, Pilates is never going to be my first choice. I just balk at the notion when people are like, you must really love Pilates. And I'm like, where have you been? What are you paying attention to? So if that message hasn't gotten through, it comes back to, like, what do you want? Not everyone uses Facebook. Not everyone uses Strava. Not everyone uses Twitch. Not everyone wants video. Some people want written. But like when I send an email, and it had an email that people have paid for in the past, and it had an open rate of 10%, then what am I supposed to do? Like, if you won't come to Facebook and you won't use office hours and you won't read your emails and you don't listen to podcasts, pray tell, how am I supposed to get through to you? How am I supposed to make sure you get your money's worth? There's a bit of work that I'm willing to do, but there has to be something that you guys are willing to do too. I will meet you somewhere close to where you're at, but I can't, there's one of me. I can't be where everyone's at all the time. So helpful things would be like, well, you know, I don't listen to podcasts and I'm absolutely never going to start, but, you know, if you had to deliver content in audio form, that would be most helpful, or whatever. I would be willing to pay an extra fee on top of it to have the transcription emailed to me that I can read at my own pace, or put it behind a wall in a membership area of an account page where I can go read it at my leisure. Great. That sort of feedback is super helpful. Just like, no, don't do it, never will, don't like it. You don't do anything that I like. That's not helpful. And granted, none of the responses were that bad. I'm just saying, like, what would you say yes to? If you look back over an 8-question survey and see 6 no's, it would be super helpful if you could tell me what you would say yes to. So, and I can't promise I'll do it, but I can promise it'll be given serious consideration. Okay. Now back to Training Peaks. So something, there was a day when I ran with Carla and had a really great day, and what was great about it was that there was nothing to say about it. It was really boring and mundane. It was the most remarkable run ever, and I posted my Training Peaks. And a bunch of you didn't comment on either of those posts on Coach MK or on my personal Facebook page, but you emailed me with screenshots asking for an interpretation of your numbers. I can't do that, and here's why. Number one, that's paperwork. That's what I literally do that for my one-on-one clients, and I'm not taking any more one-on-one clients at the moment. But here's what I will say. These are numbers that trend over time, and it's not about one variable as much as it is about how one variable interacts and moves in relation to other variables. So there might be a run, and it depends on what kind of run and on what day. So the runs that I look at and the ones that I care about the most are my easy effort runs. And what I care about in my easy effort runs are they becoming less work for me? And what is less work? It means more efficient. So to be a little more clear about that, let's say, this is your baseline, is your 140. Right? Remember, because anything underneath this, I will accept it was easy. Anything above it was you're going to have a much, and the higher it is above 140, the harder every time you're going to have convincing me that was truly an easy effort. So for an easy effort run, let's say on a Monday, I run that route and I get 3.8 miles out of it, right? And my average heart rate is 138, right? Then on Tuesday, I run the same route, 3.8, my average heart rate is 137. That is not a trend, right? Those are 2 data points on 2 days. And they're very, very vague data points, right? Now, I'm not saying you have to be out to the nth numeral decimal place in every single thing that you do, but this is not a trend. So that if you come out on Wednesday and you run and you only get 3.5 and an average heart rate of 145, this does not mean you were getting better than you stopped. That is the wrong way to look at this series, and that's exactly what a lot of you guys do, especially the people that sent me your screenshots. So here is what I look at when I feel the need to look. And mind you, I meant exactly what I said in those posts. I have not looked at these numbers in 2 years because I knew they would not be good. Okay? These are the numbers I never really introduced in the group programs because I did not want my office hours to be full of screenshots, having one-off conversations explaining to you why, if I'm not trending these numbers for you on a daily basis and over time, why I can't interpret them for you on the phone on the fly. But generally speaking, 1 hour, and again, this is super broad, 1 hour of easy effort, the way that I define it, should generate a TSS score of 1, right? Or an RTSS score. So an hour, this is how much stress it puts on your body. Very little. That's just a baseline number. There is no meaning to that number. Where the trend matters is, let's say it's an easy effort day, you out running for an hour, it's the usual time, the usual duration, usual heart rate, but it generates a 1.3. That means this was a little bit harder. That TSS score, because it's an aberration, because it's an outlier, it tells me it's not something I worry about because it doesn't mean you're trending the wrong way. This means you probably had too much to drink last night, or you didn't get enough sleep last night, or you had a fight with your spouse on the way out the door. It can mean a whole bunch of things. It just means to get the same this thing that usually brings along a benchmark of 1 was more effort today somehow that you neither saw nor felt. And that's where nutrition and hydration comes in. Is it something that you need to worry about? No. Realistically, no. But if you're elite and I'm training you one-on-one and you say, this run was harder today, I just don't feel good, I'll be like, well, no wonder, it actually was more effort. I'm going to validate you. That was more effort than usual. Did you tell me about your kid's birthday party last night? Did you end up doing shots with the other dads? Or whatever. I don't really care. So there's no meaning there unless the only meaning comes in what the trend is doing over time. And if something is out of whack, there's usually a reason. There's usually a reason. And that reason is not that you suck or you're losing fitness. It doesn't work that way. The only way you can lose fitness overnight is to get injured and then be out of the game for a really long time. Okay. So that's where I start. The next thing that I think about are these two numbers. And God help me, I know this is not, I'm saying this and please don't email me about it. Do a little reading. Joel Friel has a book called The Triathlete's Training Bible. It's where I learned a lot of this stuff. Go online, read the blog post, read everything on the Training Peaks website. They lay it out brilliantly. What I look at and what a triathlete coach looks at are a little bit different for obvious reasons. But what I care about in my runners more than anything are these two numbers. Pace to heart rate used to be a proxy for power. Now we have actual tools like Stride that fit on your shoe, and if it's on your wrist, it's not actually calculating power efficiently. So don't talk to me about that. There's a whole book written on that. Go read it too. You can do the same work that I did. But when I'm in my Training Peaks, these are the first two numbers I go to establish a baseline. When the number, like I shot here, was out of whack, the first thing I do is come and say, well, let's look at these two numbers because these are intangible. You don't see them and you don't feel them, but they matter. So, again, broadly and generally speaking, for a competitive athlete, for someone that wants to set a PR, for someone that wants to train for a marathon, for someone that has a goal, you're going to have to do the strength. The strength work matters. And because the strength work is not the only thing that impacts this number, but it's the biggest lever we can pull on this number. It tells me broadly how much power your muscles are generating. How efficiently are your muscles working? Okay? A strong muscle is going to work efficiently. A dehydrated muscle is not. Okay? So I don't have a lot, there are no good numbers, right? But there are benchmarks. And the benchmark, the prox for this figure, pace to heart rate, which is in that if you go into any run and click on the analyze button, I want to get that number to be less than 5%. I wrote that incorrectly, sorry. 5% is the biggest number I would want to see. So if you go back to those two screenshots, in the first easy effort run that I put, my power figure was ridiculous. It was like 8.67%, and that was from September the 1st, 2016. My power to heart rate, in the one that I posted, I think it was like a negative 1.6. which is amazing. That's a really good number. To have my elites and my professionals are consistently in negative territory with muscular power with that number, and that's expected, right? Because they're doing all the things. They're sleeping, they're hydrating, their nutrition is on point. They can't afford for it not to be. Any day you go out to train or race, if you are not doing everything just right, then your muscles are not getting the maximum benefit from that workout. Now that does not mean that you as a casual runner or like somebody, you can be, and casual just means not professional. If you're not professional, you don't have to walk the tightrope, right? Why would you? It doesn't matter. It's not better. We don't need perfection. But a professional athlete does. It's higher stakes because every day that they're going out and they're doing their workout hungover, their muscles are not getting the full benefit of that workout, which gives a competitor an edge over them. For us, it's not about other people. Our racing is about where we are and where we want to do. So all I care about with this number is it is what it is, but I would like to get it underneath 5%. For a pro, I expect it to be in the negative territory all the time. The second number, and again, these are not the most important. This is just where an analysis starts. If these are out of whack, I don't go any further because I can usually guess what happened based off of the TSS score that day. And this is because we're in a relationship and I see this stuff every single day. The other is the efficiency factor, and this is another thing. These are the two, when you think about all the levers that we can pull to move this number, the biggest levers are nutrition and sleep, and beyond doing the work. Efficiency factor is a proxy for metabolic overall fitness, which is a proxy for endurance fitness. So you can have really strong, powerful muscles that have no endurance because you have no cardio base. And so the number I would like to get that to is 1.0. Most non-professional athletes come to me with an efficiency factor with something way over 5. Anywhere from 8 to 12% is normal. And when we start working together, that efficiency factor is usually a 0.8. Okay? And I go through this being my goal is to get you to a 1 by the end of our 20 weeks together. When it comes to someone wanting to qualify for Boston, if you want to qualify for Boston, broadly and generally speaking, the statistical probability of that happening is massively higher. It's so high that it's probably going to happen if your efficiency factor is consistently a 1.4 on easy effort and long runs. It's not a guarantee, it's not a promise. It means this is the barest to have that I would expect to know that you have what it takes in this cycle to qualify for Boston. And again, there's a whole lot that goes into this number. So if you're a stress junkie, if you have a super stressful life, if you have a special needs kid that's kind of going through the same stuff that I am right now, then those are all levers that are going to push this number down. This is why stress management is so critical to the endurance athlete. Because if you can't manage your stress, and some things are so big and overwhelming that it's not surprising that you can't. But but that stress really, 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 it crushes this number. You could be ready to go to Boston, have one stressful day, and that workout I've seen this go in one workout, which again does not mean you're losing fitness. It means you aren't managing your stress, and stress is crushing you. I've seen this number drop to a 1.1 in a single workout, and I'm like, whoa. It's not like there's something wrong with you. Now you're not going to qualify, right? It's what happened. Whatever happened, make it stop happening because this is going to get in the way. Does that make sense? It's not about losing fitness. It's not day to day. And I know you guys look at it that way, but that is just not how numbers work. It's not how data works, and it's not how things trending and analysis works. But in a day, when you've gone from 1.4 to 1.1, that's not a loss of fitness. There's a reason. And whatever that reason was, we just need to either accept, well, I'm in a stressful situation that's not going to lift for 3 months. Okay, great. Then you're probably not going to qualify for Boston at the end of this training cycle. So let's let go of some of these expectations, relax, and get through whatever's coming your way. Okay? It is not like a death sentence, but it is what it is. This is why aberrations matter, and this is what I spend most of my time discussing with my clients. if you're going to qualify for the Olympic trials, so this is the Boston figure, bare bones, and 1.8 is the Olympic trials bare bones efficiency factor I would expect to see. So if someone comes in and says, I want to start working with you, I want to qualify for the trials, in my first month together, all we're doing is establishing baselines. Like I'm gauging their fitness, their response to stress, how they get their workouts in, the choices they make on the regular, and then the numbers start to mean something because a lot of these are a 42-day rolling average. So, and if you don't know what that is, Google it. But a rolling average tells you a whole lot more than a day-to-day. I care about how those averages move over time. That's the start of a true trending analysis. So I would expect to see in the easy effort runs, rolling average, trending over time, it would be around a 1.8% of this efficiency factor. Okay, and that none of this trending happens in Training Peaks. It happens in a separate spreadsheet that's auto-pulled and generated from a totally separate program that Training Peaks sells. So that is high level what these numbers are and how to use them. And if your question is, well, Coach, how do I make this higher? I've given you all the tools to do it and all of the material that I produced in my previous role. You have them literally in the podcast, from Ellie telling you how to eat, me telling you how to sleep, Justin telling you how to get out of your own head, especially with the Perform Like a Mother programs I think are still ongoing. Jump into one of those, it's worth it, but that's why they matter. Those are the biggest, most important levers that you can pull on the biggest, most important numbers where our analysis starts. And if something is out of whack for one day, that doesn't mean anything. You probably know what that reason is. It's not a huge deal and it's not a deal breaker. But that very high level is what these numbers mean and kind of where I would want them to be. The question of how to get there, you got to do the work at pretty much as written. And if you've been doing this consistently over time and you aren't achieving those desired results, then it might be time, if you're in a place to really get your money's worth and take it seriously, it might be time to consider a one-on-one coach. There are lots of us out there. I'm not the only one that trains my heart rate, but my way of looking at the world, every coach has their own way of looking at the world, because this leads into the next section I wanted to talk about, race strategy. So, because I've got a lot of people racing coming up pretty soon. So every coach, what makes us different? It's not it's our experience level, yes, but it's really our cues. Which coach, we're all basically saying the same things. We just come up with different cues to get you to your desired result. Like 140, I've given up. Like, there's nothing I can say that is going to have the sort of person that gravitate towards me. You're going to sound like this. You're welcome, Laura. I'm sorry that I know a lot of that stuff is confusing. It's it's intentionally vague. They want you to pay for the course. And I get that, but this is it's also the experience of working with it over time that I've derived a lot of my own meanings and sort of how do I have the conversations that I want to have with clients. But so back to what. Sorry, I'm so thirsty. Back to what I was saying. The pre-race conversations that I have with my one-on-ones and with my, when I say higher level, they're not better than you, they just have very different goals, and they're not racing against themselves, they are racing against other people. Their best doesn't matter if the three other people that show up, that are in the front of the corral with them, if their best is better than theirs, then their best doesn't mean anything. And that is a really hard place to be, live, and compete. And thankfully, when I say thank God we're not elite, thankfully we're not there where your best can be meaningless. How many times have you seen, like, this person set a PR, but they were fifth? So it's not a headline and you don't hear about it. And it's all the time. Those are the sort of stories I try to include in my Nuzzle newsletters. But I digress. So when we have the race strategy conversation, what I'm trying to do, what happens with my one-on-one clients is very different than the pre-race conversations I had in my previous role, where people demanded hard numbers and future predictions. And if I didn't predict the future, then I failed. I'm no better than the weatherman. And I get that on one hand, but I never could wrap my brain around it. Like, that is literally not how these conversations go. Either you hire a coach one-on-one and you're training to a number in the beginning, and they look at you at your Training Peaks and agree, yes, that number is realistic, we can make that happen. Or they're like, okay, and sort of go with it and hope for the best. Because that's a hard conversation to tell somebody, I don't think that's going to happen this cycle. Because no one wants to hear it. I'm kind of beyond that. The first thing that I had to do with these larger online group programs was teach people how to race. Because I'd watch people go into 5K situations and not race hard enough. I've watched them go into 10K situations and nail it. For some reason, the 10K seems to be the one everyone gauges correctly and everyone gets it. But if for anything longer or anything shorter, the non-professional runner is like, I don't know what I was supposed to do there, or they just don't go hard enough. Like 5Ks hurt. Remember I've said this, I don't race many 5Ks because they are terrible and they hurt. Hard effort will always be hard. It's just what falls out of it. So back to again some numbers, right? So my 140 pace back in like November 2016 was roughly like a 9:15. So my 140 pace now is like 11:50. So what this means is for the same effort, it's the same effort, it's a different number. This is literally the definition of efficiency. I'm trying to get back to my previous level of efficiency, and there's no way to force it. That this effort, and hopefully over time, I've got clients right now that their 140 pace is a 6:20 mile. That's crazy, right? But like the same amount of effort between me and the other person, my easy effort pace is 11:50. His easy effort pace is a 6:20. That's a factor of a whole lot of things, but there is a path from where I am to where he is, and it's just a question of how much do you want to do, how much time do you have to devote, and really how badly do you want it in a given period of time, how patient can you be? Because wanting it really badly isn't about doing all the things right now as much as it is about patience. I want this so badly, I'm still going to be here if it hasn't happened in 6 months, and that is rare. People are like, I want it, I'll do all the things. You give them all the things, they do like 10 of the things. This doesn't work, I'm done. I wasn't built for this, I'm not ready. And I'm like, I thought you were going to you wanted this so badly, you wanted it, like, okay, never mind. But that's the difference. The person that really, really, really wants it is going to be patient. So, and it's going to take a lot of patience to get from here to here, but that path forward is possible. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about increasing running efficiency and economy. That is a factor of strength so that your muscles are working efficiently along with your endurance system, so that your body's ability to metabolize oxygen and your muscles' ability to utilize that oxygen are working together efficiently in tandem over longer and longer periods of time. And that is how you decrease your running economy. That's how you go from 11:50 to a 6:20. And there are times when these guys will have a beer and pizza on a Friday night, and then they'll go for a run the next day, and the best they can pull out is an 8:25. That does not mean they lost fitness. It means that they ate something that probably tasted really good the night before. They didn't eat perfectly. It's okay. This is an aberration due to a one-off activity. It's not a redefinition of who this person is. And again, that's how the non-professional runner tends to look at it. One bad day is who I am. I'm now an 8:25 minute miler. My easy effort pace is now 8:25. The way they think about it, because you've got to be patient, is like, I ate shit last night, but it was so worth it. Now it's going to be at least a week before I'm back there, but it was worth that week. Okay? So, when we're talking, how does this get back to, so the cue that I give of 140, because I'm like, the cues that all the other coaches give really aren't that different. It's a conversational pace. You need to be able to sing the Brady Bunch theme song or the alphabet song while you run without huffing and puffing. That's how they define the talk test. People fail it all the time and have no idea that they're failing the talk test. I can get words out. Not the same. But can you sing without huffing and puffing? If the answer is no, then you know what? I've got some people you should call during their runs, and you won't know that they're running because they're not even breathing heavy. And I'm not talking about my elites. I'm talking about a couple of people in my semi-private programs right now that are getting ready to go to 3 days at the fair. They are so efficient under 140. I've called them before and had no idea these people were running. I'm like, wow, you sound really good. They're like, yeah, it's easy. It's an easy effort day. Like, this is true. This is true. I just don't get to hear it that often. So that pre-race conversation with a one-on-one client is not about, all right, so this course, you are going to run 6:30s all the way through it until you get to mile 17. You're going to have to back off a little bit, and that's going to be a 6:45. Okay, 6:45, just going up a hill. And then you're going to go downhill. Next time it's going to be 6:15. It's not a plug prescription. Like, hey, coach, how you doing, Remy? It's not this methodical prescription that you guys seem to demand. It never goes that way. I've done a couple of these in live streams. I did one with Rebecca Meyer right before the New York City Marathon, because she already knows how to race. So when someone knows how to race, and I can trust their judgment on how to race, it's a very different conversation. When I don't trust your judgment of how to race, it doesn't look anything like what I had with Rebecca. So that's why the conversations that I had in my previous role, my pre-race conversations, sounded and looked a little bit differently. I was literally teaching you guys how to approach an endurance event appropriately for the first time ever. Because more often than not, when someone gets to mile 20 and then has to walk, it's not that either their paces were either they just had really bad luck, their nutrition was terrible, or they don't know how to race. It's not that they need more endurance, it's something they need more of something. It was either the execution was wrong or the training plan was wrong, and it's usually the execution. Because I'll look at some of the heart rate data for these people, and I'm like, well, your heart rate was at 184 at mile 6. What did you think was going to happen? Like, it's amazing you made it to mile 20, because there's no good predictive element for that. How long can you last above 165? I don't know. But above one, and here's when we have the pre-race conversation. So 140, that's kind of the baseline for easy effort. Anything above this is definitely work. What does that mean? Above 140, which for most humans is well below what's called the ventilatory threshold. You can think of this as your oxygen floor, okay? This does not move. It's a function of biology that does not vary much from human to human. What does vary is at what point you are burning mostly sugar, okay? So, again, broadly and generally speaking, when we're above 140, at 140 or below, it is safe to assume you are burning, if you're under the age of 65, it is safe to assume you are burning somewhere between 85 to 100% oxygen for fuel. Okay, so that's what's happening here, right? And that's what the ventilatory threshold is. Once you've surpassed the ventilatory threshold, you are burning some percentage of glucose. Exactly what, I would argue, doesn't really matter for the non-professional runner. But if you really want to go pay for one of those fancy metabolic tests, go for it. At 165, for most humans, it is safe to assume, most humans under the age of 65, it is safe to assume that you are now burning at least 50%, sorry. So at 140 or less, it's all oxygen. Above 140, it's some minimal percentage of sugar. Above 165, there's some oxygen, but it's majority sugar. And at 180 and above, it's all sugar. Okay? And those glucose stores are finite. So the way I think about it in a race situation is once you get to 165, your clock is ticking. The maximum I have ever seen without stopping, well, I'm not going to talk about that. There's no way to predict because there's no good variable for it yet. And there's all kinds of testing and all sorts of research going on right now for that predictive variable that will tell me you can last exactly 65 minutes above 165 before you need exogenous fuel. And you can go for 3 hours. you're a superhuman. That's very, very, very rare, but I have seen it, and it's more common in the semi and the non-professional runner. So, and why that is, that science is trying to figure that out too. I think that's where psychology comes into play, personally. But I digress. Psychology, you can't like mindfulness your way into acing a marathon you haven't trained for, but you can push those boundaries further by not knowing where the boundary is or disregarding the boundary. So that's a fine line. I don't like to encourage people to think that the limit does not exist in a certain situation until we're ready to get there and be like, let's just see what happens. Let's just see what you can do. Take away all the markers and listen to nothing but your own body. So since there's no way to know whether you can last 65 minutes or 3 hours, and there's no way for me or any other coach in this world to tell you that, this is why tune-up races exist. I want you to go just race this 10K, let's see what happens, and then use that to plug in all the numbers. But that only works if you know how to race a 10K. And you do it appropriately. A lot of my clients don't, so that becomes useless. So all that just to say, and that's why the half marathon is usually, or something longer, is used for a tune-up race in a super well-trained athlete. For most of my non-professional athletes, racing a half marathon would take away at least a week and a half of training time because they'll be recovering. Even if they're running, they're still recovering from that event. We're not training towards the next one, and we can't afford it because you guys don't give me enough time. You're like, 16 weeks or less or my money back. And I'm like, well, that means we can't do a tune-up race because you literally don't have time to recover. So I don't love tune-up races for that reason, but what that tune-up race does serve is that most non-professional athletes will be out there racing for 90 minutes or more in a half marathon situation, which then tells me, well, now we know, yes, you can last for 2 hours and 12 minutes above 165. That's very good information. Could you last longer? I don't think we need to race again to find out, but let's not bet on it. Let's use that as our baseline. If I've lost you, let me know, but this is how it always works. It is guessing and checking every step of the way. And every footfall, you are making a bet. Your feet are making a bet that like your system may or may not be able, writing a check that your system may or may not be able to cash. I say make the most conservative bet possible until you've been doing this consistently for the longest period possible. So somewhere above 165, you're burning mostly glucose. Above 180, you're burning all glucose, and that clock is finite. So, and if you can't get up to either of those two numbers, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means we have to lower all of this. Maybe your work number is 120. Great. Then this comes down to 145, and that comes down to 160. That's good to know. That's why we did the EAT, to figure out, or at least have an idea. If you can't hold this pace for 10 minutes, then guess what? You're probably not going to be betting that you're going to hold it in a full marathon situation is a bad bet. Okay? So that's where we're at. So when I have this pre-race conversation, when we talk about race strategy, all of this is implied with my one-on-one clients because all the ones that I have right now, we've been working together long enough that maybe they can't spout these numbers offhand, but they know what these numbers generally are for themselves. They know that like, we want to get to the point where one output consistently over time of one pace is going to have a heart rate that starts right here and is slowly going upwards, right? So that when they finish, that average there is whatever their magic number is. And for most marathoners, I can't say that enough, it's somewhere between a perfectly properly executed marathon, not like Big Sur, but like something, and not Mount Desert Island, but something normal and rational, is going to be somewhere between 158 and like 165, your average, okay? So that's where we want to get to, where one pace, let's say 825, held consistently as possible, or one effort level that roughly translates to this pace efficiently over time, gets us an average here, because you're probably going to start at something like 110 and then end at something like 184 as you like crush it to the finish line. And it's not going to be perfect, but if you go back and look at my Strava from the race that I finished, that's exactly what it looked like. But I was at totally average fitness, so I was a totally average example. So you guys really want to kind of force this with no regards to effort, so that what I have in my average non-elite client for the first time will be like, I really want to run 8:25 in this race, and they show up and their heart rate is like in the 130s, shoots straight up, and then their pace decreases over here because they can't hold it any longer. And they end up somewhere like at 8:55 or having to walk and don't know what happened. And it's like, well, you made a bad bet, or it wasn't your day. Usually it's that they made a bad bet. So what does the pre-race conversation then kind of look like? Because we can't, this is how you have to think about it when you're not, even when you're perfectly trained. I'll give you the example of the conversation that I had with DJ right before he went and ran a great big number at Houston. It becomes a probability game. So, and I like probabilities. I used to work in reinsurance. So, get another color, sorry. My job as a coach is to, and Justin Ross has used this analogy before, it's like I'm trying to grow an orange. So, the biggest orange possible in the period of time given before the race. When DJ showed up at race day, and don't ask me how I calculated this number, that's part of my job. You can go learn it. But looking at his numbers, I knew that if the day was perfect, the best his body could possibly yield under perfect conditions is 237. Then comes the question of do I mention this number or not? Because this number is statistically improbably likely to occur, because everything has to be perfect, and he'd been sick for 2 weeks. Then the question becomes, what is most likely to happen? Is it, so, and this number is never going, and again, you accept as a coach when you know this number, that this number is never going to happen. It is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And I can't get that through the heads of my non-professional athletes. But it's like, this is a theoretical figure. If you were doing your marathon, like on a track, on a perfectly clear day, with no wind, and kind of like that with the Vaporfly when they tried to break 2 hours in the marathon. If you had those conditions, maybe this would happen, but you never get those conditions in a race. So then becomes, what is most statistically probable of happening, all things considered, for this athlete on this day? How far is it going to deviate? DJ had been sick for 10 days, and so I had no way of calculating this number. Broadly and generally speaking, someone like that, like a good average bet, a solid bet, would have been 242 and change. Okay? That would have been a safe bet. But we literally had no idea what was going to happen. And I told him, like, you know how to race, just go do your best. And I think that, my interpretation, and I'm sure he disagrees because he never agrees with me on anything. I think a big part of what worked that day was the first race he had ever entered, knowing that he might not finish it. And he had made peace the day before with the idea of, like, I'm here, I might as well start. If I feel terrible, I'll drop out by mile 9. Okay? So by accepting the worst, it was the first time he'd really ever relaxed in a race. And but because it wasn't a disaster, he's like, I think I'm going to keep going. And he did, and then he ran a 241. So there's no, again, for someone that had been sick for 10 days and woke up that morning still with stomach cramps, there's no way I could have predicted that 242. And I told him like a 248. And he got really mad at me. And that's fair. I would have been mad at me too. If you told me that on Wednesday, I wouldn't have gone. I'm like, well, thank God I didn't, because you didn't run 248. But there's no predicting that, because there's no good guess, right? Some person could walk into that, he has asthma, and Houston has really bad pollen. I know that from living there the 8 months, and I was taking allergy medicine every day that I was there, and I don't normally get allergies. I developed exercise-induced asthma there that has not plagued me since I left. There are factors in the air in Houston that to which an asthmatic like DJ could be more sensitive. So even though he's capable of 237, breathing that air, maybe the best we could hope for is a 245. This is where it just becomes a guessing game and a statistical probability game, that It's very similar to determining what's the probability it's going to rain today. Is it high or is it low? What's the probability that we're going to come within one standard deviation of this, which one standard deviation for someone like DJ is a 242? What's the chances of it being a 242 or better? Not good. Not good. So this is why, in that case, I decided not to talk about the numbers and to focus on the race itself. If you are going into a race this weekend and you don't have a coach, this is kind of how I would think about it. The best case scenario is not going to occur. What's the likeliest scenario? If you feel comfortable racing by feel, cool, do that. Racing by feel is always, and just kind of letting go, once you're experienced, is usually going to yield a better, more powerful result than being a slave to a bunch of numbers that we predicted before. That's why I like limits instead of predictions. Like, I'm not going to, like in that previous example, like predicting the 825 and saying go run 825s. I never give that instruction because I think it's a bad instruction. What if it's an 824? Then you just lost time because my number wasn't perfectly perfect and specially special. And that's, again, the wrong way. There's so many variables to manage that trying to sail through with one number is really hard. What you sail through is one effort level, and that effort level can vary. As all the other numbers I've shown you today, it can vary a lot on that day. Your EF could be off because you were stressed out traveling, or you're dehydrated where you are, or you can't get the food that you need, or your stomach is upset because there's something in the water you're not used to. Instead of trying to control everything and spin out, you just got to say, it is what it is. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, whether we're able to yield a 237 or a 248 on race day might not necessarily be due to a bad race strategy. It's going to be due to reading the situation, the other competitors, in your own body. And that is one of the hardest things in the world to learn how to do, because most of us have been told to tune that out most of our lives. Like, ignore the pain, get in the pain cave, do more, do it harder. And some of those aren't terrible cues if you're at the front, racing tactically against other people, trying to, making sure your best is out and beats their best. The rest of us in the back, where we're just trying to beat the person that we were the last time we wanted to race, or the person that we wanted to see at the finish line on race day back when we started this training cycle, those cues can be disastrous. So that race strategy, every coach has their own way of having this conversation and giving you a strategy, and that very high level is mine. I don't usually predict this number for my non-elite clients because, again, there's no point. What I can do is give you some good benchmarks like I did earlier. Well, we know that your 140 pace has been fairly consistently around a 10-minute mile, okay? And your efficiency factor has really, over the course of this training cycle, your efficiency factor has really skyrocketed. We've gone from a 0.8 to a 1.1, and that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. That's so phenomenal. That's like almost unheard of. That's a big jump. So, or that's on the higher end of the big jump scale. And we've seen that your muscular power, at first, like you were powering through all these workouts, and now your muscles are working way more efficiently, and we've brought that number from like an 8.6 down to a 4.9, and that's good. So that means your cardiovascular system is way more efficient, and your muscles are working more efficiently, which means you're going to metabolize a lot more oxygen and when you first came along. So this is where I instead of like here's the number, I'm like, okay, anything faster than, I don't know. And again, I'm just making this up. Generally speaking, your marathon pace is going to be about 60 seconds faster, 45 to 60 seconds faster than your easy effort pace, right? So I would be like, all right, you know what? Anything faster than an 8:45 in the first 20 miles might be too aggressive of a bet, back it off. And which is not to say you got to run an 8:45. That's what you hear, but that's not what I say. I say read your body, read the crowd, read the scene, read what's going on, but do not run faster than this. If you look down and see that, panic and slow down. If we were going to pick one number to really stick to and hang out at, I would start somewhere around a 9:15, feel the effort, and if that gets a little faster over time, go with that. That's what I give people that are coming with me for their first race. So, and again, these numbers are all made up. Those are not necessarily, so I should be 45 seconds faster? No. People way smarter than me that have done actual research on this and are paid to do actual research on this all say the same things that I do. Marathon pace is 45 to 60 seconds faster. Half marathon pace is anywhere from like 60 to 90 seconds faster, rarely more than that, than your easy effort pace, as long as that pace is truly easy effort. For someone that is well trained and has executed an entire training plan. And this is how the conversation goes, and this is how we look at it. And you will get to see that later this week as I get Julie ready for Rocky Raccoon. That's going to be coming up. That won't mirror this conversation exactly, because she's doing 50 fucking miles and not a marathon and not on a road. So with road conditions, things are a lot more predictable and a lot more steady and stable, because the terrain is not changing. It's very, very, very predictable, smooth, and not undulating. So that high level is what a race strategy conversation kind of looks like. And it's up to me as the coach to say, do I tell this person that number, yes or no? Because once I tell you this number, 9 times out of 10, this number, you are capable of a 2:37 marathon. It is not going to happen today, but you've got that in you. So I've learned the hard way, this breaks hearts. I thought today was going to be my 2:37 marathon day. Like, why? I told you it wasn't going to happen. This should be motivating to keep you going and keep you training no matter what happens at the finish line. It's not like you're disappointed with the 2:41. You should be like, wow, you know what? It wasn't my day, but I'm capable of a 2:37. Let's see if I can make that in the probable range in my next training cycle. That is how you should look at it. It's supposed to be a life raft that gets you through, not the anchor that weighs you down when it doesn't happen, because it won't on race day. So I'm still learning how to have this conversation with non-elite, non-professionals, because people put when professionals put pressure on these numbers, I get it. Money rides on every second and every podium finish. For non-elite, non-professionals, I mean, you guys just kind of invent ways to be disappointed with yourself, and it's hard to work around all of that. It's hard to find one conversation that's going to work for everyone the same way it's going to find one method of communication that works for everyone, even when they pay to receive that stuff. Like, well, I don't want emails, I don't want podcasts. Well, we can't find what's going to work for everyone, so I got to find out what works for me, and then start from there and hope that people stay with me long enough that we learn each other. So forgive me as if over the years I have failed to learn you quickly enough. I'm forgiving y'all all the time. I just don't say it. So I have no idea if this is helpful at all for any of you, especially if you're racing Austin this weekend. I have not forgotten. I just haven't had the bandwidth to finish typing up all my thoughts on the course. I promise if I don't get it typed out, at least I will stream it before the end of the week. It's just going to be finding time to do it, because yet another sitter of ours quit, and this is our last week with her, and I didn't see that coming. So I'm barely treading water as it is with stuff in my family life, which again I don't share because it's literally no one's business, and if I'm the public figure, they are not. So if ever there's something I'm not telling, it's because it's not my story to tell, not because I'm trying to trick or lie to you guys. And I'm sensitive to that because of some of the accusations that I got in the survey. But I've been clear, consistent, and truthful every step of the way. And if you disagree, then you might want to go back and look through my YouTube backlog and see the messaging has been very, especially, and the one to start with is my tear-filled, hour-long conversation the night that I resigned. I got enough, and if that isn't enough for you, then we probably don't need to speak. So, yay! There's that. There's this. If you have more questions, let me know. I know you're not going for 2:37, Julie, but I think you should try. I'm just kidding. No. But this is generally how our conversation is going to go. I'm going to point out like where you were when we started, what the changes, improvements that I've seen, kind of reconcile that with what you feel and your confidence levels. And in over an hour, I need to drink. Thank you. Yeah, Austin is 2 weeks, but I've got runners that are headed out this weekend. And they're going to be there. I forget, because I've got people that are working the whole week. I think, is it Tucson that's in 2 weeks? What's coming up this weekend is definitely Phoenix. So that athlete's going there. But I'm going to try to get, either way, I'm going to try to get the Austin thing out by the end of this week, because my next week is a disaster. Because I will be down 2 sitters. And I'm hoping to replace them this week, but I don't know how that's going to go. So we shall see. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, you're a coach, you're loved, you're winning at life. The best way to find me, the best way to think about my tools, if you want to interact with me, Twitch is a place to do it. If Twitch is not your thing, that's fine. Everything that I do is going to be exported and live on my YouTube channel. You can go watch that at your leisure. I would recommend subscribing to that if you know that you don't use Twitch and can't come here regularly. Other ways, Nuzzle. You can get my Nuzzle newsletter, and all of these links are on my personal Facebook page. You can click, you go to the About section on my Facebook, Mary Catherine Brooks Fleming Facebook page. Go to the About section and you will find my Nuzzle, my Twitch, my YouTube, my CoachingLove.com, my podcast. You will see links to every single one of those things, and you can consume what you want. Don't whatever you want, but don't say that like I'm not here doing stuff, because I'm here doing stuff all the time. So there you go. I can't wait to speak to you soon, Julie. Everybody else, yay for Super Bowl Sunday. Go eat whatever the fuck you want, and don't worry about how your run feels tomorrow. You know why it doesn't feel good. Your muscles are not powered. If their muscles are powered or dehydrated because you're powering them all with beer and spinach dip today, that's awesome. But then you don't get to blame the training plan or the coach when the numbers are off tomorrow. It's just one day. You'll recover.